Coming up on 2.5 Geeks, we're talking the Google Nexus 7 apps, and Windows 8 apparently will kill video gaming dead, at least on PCs, and more.
The bar has been set wicked fast. It rocked in the benchmarks. We're going to up the ante a little bit.
Processing power, I kind of understand this. Welcome back to 2.5 Geeks. I'm Ayaz Akhtar alongside Dave Altavilla, a newcomer to this show. You might not have seen him in a while.
Yes.
And Marco Chiappetta. How are you guys doing?
How's Marco doing? That's what I want to know.
Oh, I'm doing okay. How you doing?
I'm not bad for a, what is it, Tuesday?
It's a Tuesday, yeah. New recording day. Very exciting. There's a lot of scheduling changes for myself, and these two gentlemen have been very busy. They've been, putting together contest details. We're actually going to talk about that later. They've been testing out equipment. There's a beta site that we can't even talk about yet.
Ooh,
all kinds
careful
of things. Uh-oh. I think we just... Shh. You didn't hear that. So it never happened. So
we may have to kill you now.
Let's change the subject entirely. Let's talk about the Google Nexus 7 tablet. Now, Hot Hardware took a look at this 7-inch Jelly Bean running Google-only device. Wi-Fi only, too. What did Hot Hardware think, Dave?
We liked it, and our editor-et extraordinaire, Jen Johnson, actually gave it the Editor's Choice Award, wouldn't you know? So, yeah, very fond of this new 7-inch slate from Google, manufactured by ASUS. And, actually well put together device from a hardware standpoint. I don't want to say standard issue, but it's a, it's a quality 7-inch display, 1280 by 800 resolution. Under the hood is what makes it a little bit different than probably any other 7-inch tablet on the market right now. Quad-core Tegra 3 processor by NVIDIA. So lots of horsepower there. Multi-core processor with good NVIDIA graphics, a gig of RAM, and 8 or 16 gig storage options. And it's about as thin as the Samsung Galaxy Tab 7, which is about the thinnest 7-inch slate on the market, and a little bit thinner than tablets like the Kindle Fire. So good stuff. At 8 gig options, run at $199 MSRP, and the 16 gig option is $249.99.
Now this version, this tablet's running the latest version of Android, Jelly Bean. That's Android 4.1. Now, some people are calling it effectively a glorified phone because the home screen cannot be put into landscape. I find that to be a minor quibble. How did you find Jelly Bean? Because, Google put a lot of effort into this. They had that thing called Project Butter. It's supposed to be very, very smooth. What did you guys think?
Well, you did touch on something there that takes a little bit of getting used to, as they say. When I first picked up the device, and I actually spent some time with it before Jen did, that's exactly what I sort of struggled with. Automatically you pick up a tablet, you expect it to auto-rotate with the gyroscope and accelerometer. Horizontal landscape. The home screen is set up in portrait mode. But apps, depending on the app, will auto-rotate for you. So it's just one of those things where you kind of just have to get used to that home screen only being available in portrait mode. But a 7-inch tablet, it's a little bit less important in my opinion. 10-inch slates really lend themselves to reorientating the home screen. It's sort of almost a necessity with a 10-inch slate. Not so much with a 7-inch slate. And Jelly Bean really brings some nice features and what we came to appreciate, increased performance. And so you get things like Google Now, which is a nice additional new widget built in that sort of lets Google get their hooks in a little bit deeper. It might creep you out a little bit. It uses things like your browsing history, your location, time of day, and all that stuff to serve you up content. Maybe it's things that are near and dear to your heart, whether it's sports headlines, the weather, but it will gather this information from multiple sources. Apps that are installed on the slate, from your web browser history, as well as your geolocation, the time of day, and it starts to learn your preferences. So maybe you're comfortable with that, maybe you're not, but it does bring you relevant content in the process with that as well. So what do you think about that? Have you heard anything about Google Now yourself?
I have heard about Google Now. I actually use Google Now. I bought the Nexus 7 myself, and I'm enjoying the heck out of this. The Google Now, I think, is really beneficial if you have an always-on connection and you are constantly using your device. I think it's probably much more useful on a cell phone. But since this is a Wi-Fi only device, it doesn't exactly have all my searches there. It will tell me the weather widget. It'll show me a nice little card for that. I find it to be a nice feature that will basically tell me, hey, look, this is a little sampler. You might want an Android phone in the long run because it's a really neat feature. And predicting, I was looking up some locations. And it's like, oh, would you like to know your commute time to this place? It's like, well, I don't live in Emeryville, but thanks for guessing because I was looking around. But it's a work in progress, and I think it's getting there. I want to go around the horn real quick and wonder, okay, now it has no rear camera, no ability to expand unless you decide to use the micro USB in a fashion that is not necessarily touted by Google. Mark, what do you think of the fact that they didn't put a camera on the back because they said either we put a crappy one back there or nothing? We decided to go with nothing. And then they said no expandability.
So the camera on a tablet, I think, is a minor issue. I don't know very many people that use their tablet to take photos, and if they do, it's in a pinch because the photos basically stink on most tablets. And when you see people walking around using them for photos, it just looks funny. Especially, the Olympics are going on. During the opening ceremony, some of the athletes were walking around with tablets. It just looks funky, for lack of a better word. As for the expansion, I'm kind of on the fence. If it wasn't a Nexus device, it probably wouldn't be a big deal. But since it is, and it's kind of lends itself to modding and the enthusiast community and the development community, I would think having expansion would be beneficial. People would really like to have that. Since it's not there, maybe it hinders some activity in that scene. But again, not a huge deal. I don't know many people filling up their tablets, and for a $199 device for the 8 gig model, I don't think it's a huge issue. What about you?
I'd beg to differ on the expansion slot thing. I think one of the things you have to remember that people use for this for that slot is just getting media onto the tablet, whether it be pictures or maybe it's downloadable content, music, what have you. It just allows more portability and access to the device versus having to download or tether it via USB. So, I mean, I think that is definitely a small drawback. Why couldn't they have squeezed that in there? The camera thing definitely makes sense to me. I mean, you're trying to reduce costs. This device, it's $199 in its 8 gig form. You got to drive cost out of it, and you hit the nail on the head. Not many people really care all that much about a camera on a tablet. But what the flip side of that is, what's interesting to me, and I think to you as well, to enthusiasts, performance enthusiasts that we are at Hot Hardware, this is a 7-inch slate that really has some nice horsepower under the hood. And this thing, along with the performance enhancements that Jelly Bean brings, and optimized JavaScript and web performance are key performance enhancements in Jelly Bean. This thing scored top of the pack for just about any 7-inch slate we've ever tested, and outperformed in certain tests some of the 10-inch slates, Tegra 3 10-inch slates with Jelly Bean, running on that Tegra 3. So you got Limpack performance on this device, top of the pack, Sun Spider performance. Right at the top of the pack, right next to the iPad 2, and traditionally that's a JavaScript benchmark. Apple has been very strong there. Here, Google is closing the gap, again with the help of NVIDIA hardware, but with Jelly Bean. Right where browser mark, top of the pack score, the fastest tablet we've ever tested, and right where's browser mark benchmark, and that's indicative of browser performance. So really nice performance in this slate for what we really have to accept is kind of bargain basement pricing. I mean, the Kindle Fire, everybody kind of knocked at it for, Amazon taking a loss leader on this thing just to get their tablet out in the mainstream and get people to their content stores. But Google kind of one-upped them in the hardware department, at least in terms of the processing power on the hood. So good stuff with that.
Let's move on from the hardware world to the software world. Now, Hot Hardware had a big feature about open source apps for every operating system. Now, I'm running Windows 3.1 constantly, so I can't wait to dig my hooks into this and find out what great applications I can get for Windows 3.1. I know Marco's going to smack me with something through the internet for making that joke.
Digital dope slap.
Yeah, I'm not going to smack you. I'm just really feeling sorry for you, to be honest. No, just kidding. So this article is actually pretty cool. We have a really smart forum member who contributes articles from time to time. In the forum, he goes by the name Evil, spelled in leet speak, of course. But the author's name is Jesse Litton. He's a really smart guy, frequent visitor at Hot Hardware, and he's a longtime open source Linux enthusiast. So he figured, hey guys, let's share some of the best open source free apps that are across platforms. So Windows, OS X, Linux, and let's teach the audience about all this kind of stuff. So we featured the usual things like free browsers. Everybody's going to be familiar with that. But we also covered content creation stuff, office type apps, animation, professional apps. And Jesse goes through each category and outlines a few of the standout apps in those particular categories. We featured stuff like GIMP and Inkspace and LibreOffice and Audacity. Audacity is an audio editing program. Just lots of cool information. And as we mentioned, the apps are all free, and they'll work on any modern OS.
Modern OS. That's a slight dig at Windows 3.1. I think maybe slightly. No, I haven't used Windows 3.1 in about... Geez, how long ago was 1995? That's a long freaking time. That was a very long time. Any surprises? I know a lot of people, when they think open source software, they think, look, there's no way I'm going to get a video editor. There's no way I'm going to get an audio editor. Sure, I can get an Office thing. But, I mean, what applications do you think people would be surprised to find that are free and open source, Marco?
Some of the as far as, shocking surprises to people not in the scene is there's free open source games, and pretty cool games at that. Jesse featured a game called Zero AD. Graphics look great, free, and another game called Alien Arena. The graphics look kind of funky, but hey, free open source, multi-platform, really cool stuff. I also think people would be surprised at the depth of some of the applications. Sometimes you think free, you think, limited feature availability, you got to pay for the pro version, it only works for X number of machines, just basic limitations. But some of this stuff is really feature rich. You have LibreOffice, doesn't quite have all the features of Microsoft Office, but I think it would cater to 95%, maybe higher, 98% of the users out there. And you also have something like the GIMP, which it's very comparable to Photoshop. Can it do everything Photoshop does? No, but it's free, and it'll, cover what 90% of the people are going to use Photoshop at home. Maybe professionals aren't going to want to go for it, but really, really a great free app. Something that I think everybody should check out, especially if you're limping along on MS Paint right now.
The other thing is, if you don't like the apps, you haven't lost anything. It's free. Try them out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resources out there when it comes to learning how some of these applications work. I know GIMP, there's a bit of a learning curve compared to Photoshop, but I definitely suggest, if you're willing to give it a try, I know the GIMP is pretty awesome. LibreOffice is awesome. Audacity. I've used Audacity forever, so I highly suggest a lot of these things. Let's move on to back to the world of hardware. Let's move to a speculative thing. This reminds me of Tech News Today, that show I do. Apparently, Taiwan Semiconductor might be building a whole part of its business around Apple. Now, this is not a company that Apple works with right now. As far as I know, Taiwan Semiconductor works with, I think, Qualcomm and I think Ethereos, if I'm right about that, and a whole bunch of other companies. Dave, look at this. What's the actual story? What's going on?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I actually spent 18 years in the semiconductor industry, so I've got a little bit of background in the space. And TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, as you noted, is a fab, a manufacturing plant of semiconductor wafers, and that's from, growing silicon right on up through slicing and dicing those chips. And they are the biggest fab in the world. There's lots of other fabs out there. It's semiconductor fabs, companies like Charter and a few others. But these guys have customers from across the planet, whether it's Apple, NVIDIA. I mean, the list goes on. and on and on. You mentioned Atheros. I mean, I'm sure there's even joint relationships between Intel and Spots and AMD and TSMC. Certainly we know there are, and certainly for the graphics side of the AMD house, the ATI folks have used TSMC for a long time. So their model, interestingly enough, their whole model, TSMC, was born out of the need for semiconductor manufacturers in the early days, the cost of developing higher complexity chips on silicon was just exponentially growing as manufacturing technologies and die geometries got smaller and smaller. And you hear, die geometries going from 0.5 nanometer, way back in the day on down to 28 nanometer now and 20 nanometer and smaller. 22 nanometer is where Intel is at right now. You're talking about just the cost to develop the mask set alone. This is the geometric map of what they place on a wafer is millions of dollars just for a mask, and that's before you even print the wafer, right? You actually etch on the wafer to get the design and the circuit mapped out and laid on the wafer itself. So what we realized, what happened over the course of the years was that semiconductor companies like all these guys that go to them, whether it be Atheros or AMD or ATI, that NVIDIA goes to them, started figuring out, geez, we can't keep, building fabs to make chips. We got to design the chips and then have somebody else do them and outsource. And that's where TSMC comes in. They're an outsource model. They're a manufacturing plant for a ton of the world's chip design companies that are what they call fabless. And so what's interesting is they've got customers from across the globe. They sell to literally everybody. And now the model seems to be shifting back a little bit to where certain OEMs like Apple are getting so big that they would consume an entire fab's capacity, an entire TSMC plant's capacity. So it's an interesting sort of paradigm shift in the whole model and the way it evolved over the years.
Now, if Apple did take up a bunch of TSMC's resources, wouldn't that just kind of irritate all the other partners for TSMC? I mean, is Apple enough of a player to the point where TSMC is willing to potentially irritate its previous partners?
Oh, yeah. And you know what? It's one of those things where if you can pay to play, you will. And there isn't much anybody else can say about it. Certainly, you'll see opportunity for smaller fabs to capture some market share from TSMC. I'm sure they'll struggle with that. But really, this game is about bleeding edge technology. And when you talk about customers like an Apple that can come in and help you pioneer a process technology to help you blaze a trail, it takes more than just fab equipment and fab engineers to get to the next generation die geometry to compete with the likes of an Intel that has endless resources and fab capacity as well as technology, next generation technology. If you have a partner that can help you pioneer that technology, like Apple, with all the resources they have, TSMC would almost be foolish, as long as the deal's set up right, not to take advantage of that. Now you've got a company like Apple with the deep pockets they have will help them get an edge in driving that technology because they can help them invest in it. And so TSMC's customers, the smaller customers that don't have dedicated fab capacity, will eventually, as a result of that, benefit sort of in a trickle down. I hate to use that phrase, but sort of in a trickle down, result of that is, other customers will benefit. So it's a little bit of a win-win, but it's definitely a challenging thing, I'm sure, for the TSMC sales team moving forward as they sort of embrace that. Yeah, you could buy a whole plant if you want it. So I think it'll be very interesting to see. I think you'll see more of this, perhaps. Dedicated fab capacity, dedicated fab lines for the biggest players in the markets. It makes sense, actually.
Let's move on to an unsung hero that's always in pretty much everyone's home at this point. It's there, and you never notice it until it's down. Let's talk about routers, because they're just sitting there in a closet usually. You don't even think about them until they're missing. It's like something you take for granted. but it looks like Western Digital's gotten into the game. Now, Marco, aren't all the internals effectively the same? Is this just Western Digital thrown on their logo on effectively every other router that's out there?
Yes and no. So there's two main chipset providers for routers. It's a Broadcom and a Theros. But the real difference with many routers out there today, it's in the firmware and in the customizations. So Western Digital's actually done some really cool stuff for this first batch of wireless devices they came out with. So the first story is, Western Digital's not just about storage anymore. They kind of were creeping into the living room with the WD Live for the last few years. But these WD MyNet routers are now, their entry into the wireless networking space. And we took a look at the MyNet N900 HD dual band router. And now first, let me just get some quick specs out of the way that kind of differentiate it. So it's a 802.11 ABGN router, dual band, 450 megabits on both, so it's an N900 router. Two USB ports on there to use for storage or for wireless printer sharing. But what stands out on this device, on at least the one we looked at, there's 8 gigabit LAN ports, 1 for the WAN connection and 7 for the internal network. That's more than any other router out there. And now Western Digital also really differentiates in the firmware. The firmware on this device has a really easy to use menu, super easy to navigate, even for first timers. Everything is well laid out, everything looks good. Big icons, easy to follow menus. All of the items are explained properly. But the real standout feature in the router is something called Fast Track Plus QoS. So lots of routers have QoS or quality of service capabilities, but you have to customize it yourself. Western Digital went ahead and optimized these routers for streaming and for VoIP and gaming duties. So you plug it in, set it up, turn it on, turn on the Fast Track feature, and now your streaming media gets priority over your network, so it's not going to drop if you're doing something else on the network.
So you're saying that it has a more user-friendly interface. But when it comes to routers, I mean, you kind of have to know what you're doing. First, you got to know what a QoS is, and you got to have to know what exactly is going over what protocol. And it's kind of annoying to have to figure that out. So the user interface is really simple, Marco?
Yeah, really simple, super easy to use, and you don't have to kind of figure out the QoS. The most popular services, Western Digital's already taken care of it for you. So we tested it out with Netflix and had a 3 gig file being downloaded over the broadband connection at the same time. And Netflix never drops a frame. It stays the priority on the network. It keeps its bandwidth, and Netflix just keeps working. But it works with Hulu, other services as well. And it's literally, you go into the router setup and you turn it on, and it's explained what it does. So even if you're a beginner and you have no idea what QoS is, you could still figure it out with this router, I believe.
Definitely sounds like something that you would probably want for gaming, which apparently, by the way, you're not going to want on your PC because that'll be dead, at least on Windows 8. According to Valve's Gabe Newell, he's saying that Windows 8 is going to be the death of PC gaming entirely. And as far as I know, he thinks Linux is the future. What on earth is this guy talking about?
So you want me to start?
Go for it, Marco.
So yeah, you kind of gave the gist of what Newell said. He called Windows 8 a catastrophe. He thinks Windows 8 is going to come. We're going to lose OEMs. It's going to kill OEMs. It's going to kill margins. It's going to hinder gaming. It's the coming of the apocalypse for PC gaming, according to Gabe Newell. As much as I think that guy's brilliant, I've met him, I've sat at a table and talked to him, I'm friends with him on Facebook, super smart guy. He's an ex-Microsoft employee as well. I sort of think he's dead wrong on this one. Maybe he's got a little animosity because the Windows Store and Xbox Live is going to be integrated. Perhaps there's going to be some more competition for Steam there eventually. And he's kind of taking it out on Microsoft. But I just don't see it happening. In one of the most recent posts on the Building Windows 8 blog, Microsoft just explained how everything is going to be accelerated in Windows 8. GPU acceleration for tons of different stuff. It's also DX11.1. If you kind of sit back and think about that, it's going to force GPU manufacturers to have really perfect drivers, because if you're going to get WCL certification or get Microsoft certification and have 3D acceleration throughout the OS and other acceleration throughout the OS, the drivers are going to have to be solid. You're also going to have new features with DX11.1. I don't see how that's going to hurt gaming. Now, the Metro interface, I think it's ugly. At least on a big desktop, I think it's ugly. But once you have your shortcut, who cares? I really don't think it's going to hurt gaming at all. What do you guys think?
Dave, what do you think of this disaster? Is it a disaster? Is Windows 8 a catastrophe, or is this just sour grapes? Because, yeah, the Windows App Store, the Windows Market, whatever they're calling it, Windows Store, that's what they call it. Is that going to just take away from Steam, and Gabe's a little bit miffed?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're talking about here to some degree. I don't know if that's the complete motivating force behind Gabe's statements. And who was the other game developer?
Blizzard.
Yeah, Blizzard that came out and said the same thing. I think everybody's very much afraid of their pocketbook. Everybody's very much afraid of their business model with Microsoft and Windows 8 and what it means to the marketplace, because that's really, I mean, it's built in, it's part of the hook, and let's face it, they're going to be competitors. They're going to be fierce competitors at some point. Right now, games for Windows and all that stuff, you know, the stuff that Microsoft has out for the current platform, Windows 7, is just not that good, and Steam really doesn't have that much competition. I think it's coming with Windows 8, and I think, you know, Marco hit the nail on the head. You put an icon, a tile, whatever it is in Windows 8 that invokes the game. Once you invoke the game, you're in the game UI. It's not it's not Windows 8 you're dealing with anymore. You're now in the game environment. And so I cannot see how it can really affect the game experience all that much at all. I think it may affect very much how games are distributed moving forward, and I think that's what some of this means. You know, and you know, the comment about OEMs are going to go out of business, you know, there's going to be some churn, especially when you think about Microsoft Surface and Microsoft getting into hardware. Well, guess what? The OEM manufacturers have been kind of riding it for too long with, you know, sort of cookie cutter, you know, designs that, you know, people sort of copy and tweak, and there's not a lot of innovation. They got to start innovating more to compete in the market with the likes of Apple and now Microsoft. Microsoft saying, hey, guess what? You know, Apple's having a lot of fun here. We need to replicate this, and I'm not sure we're going to wait around for our OEM partners to make that happen. They're kind of making it happen themselves. So I think a lot of this kind of, you know, is evolving around that situation with Microsoft and the competitive landscape. I think that's what it's really all about, and why some of these folks are coming out of the woodwork against Windows 8. I can't see it being a nail in the coffin for Windows gaming. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
There was a line about OEMs going out of business, like you said, Dave. Their margins are really narrow right now. It's not like they're making a lot of money. It's one of the reasons why Dell and HP are really more enterprise-focused and less consumer-based. I mean, HP is still consumer-based, but Dell kind of moved very, very far away from catering to just, I guess, regular people, and worried about enterprise because their margins are so low. So it's kind of interesting to say, oh yeah, the OEMs, a bunch of them are going to leave. Well, they're leaving now already because there's already a small margin on these PCs. I still think the Linux line is much more interesting, that Steam's going to try to get all its stuff on Linux. There's been a rumor like floating around that Valve is working on a Steam box, its own piece of hardware. And if it was Linux-based, that would make a lot of sense. I know they're porting over Steam and I believe Left 4 Dead 2 to Ubuntu. That's the first versions of Linux that will have everything ready. You guys think there's a Steam box coming? Maybe that's what this is about. Forget PC gaming. You're going to want a Steam box.
I'm not sure about the Steam box. They've denied it. It could happen. I'm pretty sure they're exploring the idea. I wouldn't bet on that. I do think that Gabe mentioned how much of a focus they're going to put on Linux, and I think that's a good idea, even if it's just to kind of push the Linux ecosystem. Having good quality games is a big deal for a lot of people, and if people can get their Steam library on Linux, I think some people would switch. To add another wrinkle to what you guys were both saying, when you look at OEMs that innovate, guys like a Main Gear, I'm going to use as an example, they're much smaller than the giants, but when you innovate and you have a good product, you can have higher margins. And the proof is in the market. It's just the guys racing to the bottom are the ones that have no margin. And then I want to go another step further and discuss Surface for a second. If Surface is successful and Microsoft kind of pushes OEMs to innovate in the tablet space as well, I think we're max a generation or two away from having tablets with powerful, potentially discrete graphics, NVIDIA Kepler class graphics, and Ivy Bridge CPUs, you now have a whole new class of gaming machines for PC gamers, technically. So I think game developers need to think about that possibility as well.
You mentioned a minute here frightened me because I'm thinking about there were other companies like that, Alienware and Voodoo, and then the two big companies bought them and destroyed them. Well, what's the word? They didn't destroy them; they swallowed them whole. And
I think that's interesting. I was going to mention that. I think Marco, hit the nail on the head with innovation there. You look at Dell; they still have the Alienware business unit. It is doing very well. And we still get lots of releases from the folks at Alienware, and they still sell a bunch of those notebooks and desktops. HP didn't do so well with Voodoo. I don't know why that is. But I can tell you that there's lots of folks, making high quality, PCs and differentiating, and and even in the tablet space as well, versus Apple, and they're able to make a good living on it. It's just one of those things where you just can't make the average gray box anymore. You've got to really wrap up value in a total solution and innovate. And the thing with Linux, it makes perfect sense, guys, right? Gabe Newell's looking at Microsoft saying, yeah, we got this thing called Windows 8, and guess what? We're going to have our marketplace on it. Well, what do you do? How do you address shrinking market share as a result of a big 800-pound gorilla walking into the room? You go to another platform and you expand your market footprint over there. It's additional footprint that it makes perfect sense. I would have done the same thing if I was them. Get it on Linux, man, because there's a lot of open source Linux folks out there, and they just love to have those games. Good stuff.
Like going from an 800-pound gorilla to like a little tiny chimp. I don't even know the name of one of these things. I don't know if that's
a tiny idea. Chimp. He's really pissed off and he fights hard.
A really angry tiny chimp. That's the future of gaming, if you've been wondering. Let's get off of our Valve and Steams and Monkeys and Primates and talk about a contest detail. Maybe some details about a contest. Marco, What the heck is going on?
We got lots of good stuff going on. First,
big stuff.
Let's talk about what's happening right now. I have a few more days left. We hooked up with NVIDIA to give out a bunch of beta keys for End of Nations. I still have maybe 40 of the 100 original keys left. So if you want to get in on that, hit the site. We'll put the link in the description. Come by the site. Send us a note. I will get you a key. First come, first serve. We have a few left. Now, finally, we can announce a big contest. Finally, we have hooked up with Corsair, and we have an awesome giveaway coming. So Corsair is going to hook us up with the brand new Corsair Graphite 600T case in this hot new silver color. It looks awesome. An HX 850 watt power supply, an H80 cooler. They are brand new Dominator Platinum memory. We're also going to have a Force GS 180 gig SSD, and Vengeance M90 mouse, the K90 keyboard, and the Vengeance 2000 headset. So basically every class of Corsair accessory, and we're going to wrap those around a Z77 motherboard and Core i7 2600K and a Radeon 6970 graphics card. I'm going to build it, do the build video, and send it out to a lucky winner. All you have to do, we're going to keep it simple, become fans of us in Corsair on Facebook, share out the contest, and do tons of commenting on Hot Hardware, and you have a chance to win.
That sounds fantastic, and yet another thing I can't win. You guys, you viewers, are freaking lucky, I gotta say. That Marco builds beautiful machines, and this is loaded. This is absolutely loaded. Oh, yeah. That's going to be fun. And you know what? You still probably could play PC games on it because they're still gaming on PCs. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, games will probably work. And as excited as I am about this contest, we actually had a bunch of stuff fall into place, and the next two contests are already lined up. So we're going to be rocking for a few weeks here.
Going to be a flurry of them.
I wonder where you could find out all kinds of information about this. I would bet HotHardware.com would have details and tell you exactly how you could be a winner of something like this. Or maybe you're like, that's great, I don't want to win a contest. I don't want to get great hardware. I don't know why you'd want to think that, but I guess you could. But you want to read about everything we talked about. You can do that. That's also at HotHardware.com. You got news, reviews, videos, everything you could think of in one amazing site, which I hear is going to change slightly. Dave is getting, you can see him getting slightly angry because we did not approve this little leak.
Oh.
No,
No, I'm not angry. We just can't tell too many secrets. But we have a new design in the works, and it's going to be beautiful.
And I, like I've said before, my bet is an all-flash sight, and the color will change from blue to pink for Hot Hardware. That's my bet.
I was gonna go ASCII characters. Wouldn't that be better?
That's interesting. I bet it'd load fast. Super fast. Always looking for the bright side. No, it's going to be a very slick redesign from what I understand. And I understand very little. So let's talk about where else you can get Hot Hardware content around the web. You can go to hothardware.com, like I said, or you can go to youtube.com/hothardwarevids for videos, because maybe you're tired of reading. Or you can go to dig.com/hothardware, twitter.com/hothardware, or facebook.com/hothardware, or even Google+. Do a search for Hot Hardware, and you can +1 them, or you can circle them, or whatever it is Google says you can do to Hot Hardware things. Is it both?
Put us in your friendly circle thing, yes.
Yes, you can put them in a circle, a round circle of goodness. I think that you can tell that this episode has absolutely broken me, because I'm talking gibberish by now. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everybody soon.